Hello and welcome back to Suzerain under the Republic of Swords. And in today's episode, well, first we're going to check out the news and see what people think. Rain leading proposed reforms. Our sources informed us that the plan is underway by the government to start the drafting the reform package. Finally, we seem to have a president who pursues something significant in the early days of his term. President Rain is already proving that he's the right man for the job. As rumors circulate about successful talks about future proposal in collaboration with important figures from the PFJP, the significant development that shows that the administration listening to the will of the Swedish citizens. We hope that once the constitutional changes are approved, it will be the start of a new era for our country towards a bright future. Economist, unleashing energy, an analysis of EPA's potential. Recent data-driven forecasts from our economic analysis indicate that repealing the Energy Protection Act could unlock a new era of robust growth in Swordsland. A thorough examination of market trends underscores the tremendous potential for economic expansion. Should energy companies be granted unfettered access to the market? Furthermore, we propose an intriguing strategic move. The government should contemplate a co-investment venture with Resia and Gasum. I've already done it. The initiative could potentially draw the attention of Rumberg, building upon the recent commitments made by Resia. The economic implications of such a maneuver could be game-changing, underlying the need for a bold reevaluation of the EPA's Sure, I agree. That sounds like a great plan. Preparations underway for the annual Binfi Festival. It's that time of year again, the largest cultural festival in the entirety of Swordland. Binfi Festival has begun its preparations. This year's venue was picked to be the newly built Binfi High Arts Theatre with a total capacity of 8,000 people. For those who do not have tickets and can, as always, enjoy the events that span the whole city. Especially after the recent events, we can't wait for 4 days of panels, theater plays, expeditions, and music. Woo! Read the report. Reform Committee started preparations. Vice President Victorn reported that along with Lucien Gallade, the committee has started working on the written aspects of the package as per the needs outlined previously. They will soon get the legal team involved to complete the writing process. The needed 150 signatures for the proposal has started to be collected within the USP. Dinner with the Business Council. We are in Lochevin to work with the Business Council to access weaknesses in the economy. Simon organized a dinner with the affluent economic figures of Swordland. When we arrived, the streets were bustling with activity, even though the atmosphere in the country was tense. Locheviners didn't seem very worried. Together with Walter Tust, Edith Agnok, Mikael Evan, and Simon Hall, we entered the renowned Eastern restaurant by the coast. A short, blond man, whose embroidered pockets read manager, greeted us and waved his arms in excitement as he told us how pleased he was to have us in his establishment. Beaming with pride, he led us to a private room and got us seated at a large table, covered for the occasion with a maroon tablecloth. We were quickly served by a group of servers. Walter spoke as they started taking our orders. I recommend the Lochevin salmon of this place, President. I know that you're from Lochevin, but I bet you haven't tasted anything like this before. Don't get me wrong, Mr. Tusk, but of course I've tasted this greatness many times here already. Excuse me, President. I should have known that a man of your caliber would be regular at Asturia. But I will order the salmon. I lured a Lochevin salmon for the main course. The servers took their notes and asked about the second dish. I'll take some rice. The servers placed glasses in front of each of us and served bread and water. After they were done taking orders, they quickly left us alone in the private room. Mr. President, I didn't have the possibility to thank you for coming today. Your presence means a great deal. Indeed, sir. It's an honor to dine with you. It's great to be here with the members of the Business Council. We should thank Simon for organizing this meeting. No need for that. I hope everybody enjoys the evening. Simon gestured at the expensive-looking red wine bottle that one of the servers had just brought to the table. Mr. President? Nod. I nodded at him. He started to carefully pour some wine in my glass and waited for me to taste it before filling it up. I took a sip. The taste of the wine was immediately stimulating and delightful to my palate. It immediately reminded me of our visit to my father's vineyard when I was a little kid. The wine's sweet and bitter flavors exploded in my mouth. The aroma of gooseberries and lilacs tumbled across my tongue. My mouth tingled with them long after I'd swallowed. How is it? Is the taste to your liking? It tastes like heaven. Reminds me of my father's vineyards. I've heard he was a big wine connoisseur. May he rest in peace. Thank you. Simon filled up my glass. After filling everybody's glasses, Simon stood up and raised his glass. I'd like to raise a toast to all of you here today. We're meeting here tonight in difficult times, but I believe that, with hard work, cooperation, and trust, we will get through this period as well. I'd like to thank Mr. Rain again for his decisiveness when it comes to economic policies. I'm sure we will stop this recession. I also thank Mr. Tusk for being here with us today. His presence is an honor. And of course my colleagues from the Business Council, Miss Agnuk and Mr. Evan. Without you, none of this would have been possible. Let's drink to the future of cooperation and growth. For a prosperous Swordland. Everybody raised their glasses and toasted each other. Clink! After a couple of more minutes, the servers arrived with our meals. When I tasted the food, I went back to my past. It reminded me of my childhood in the city. Even though I couldn't recall much about my father, I remembered that he also loved the food of Astura. So, how did you find the food of the best dining restaurant in Lachavan, Mr. President? Fine food is a fine art, but this particular one is a masterpiece. I know exactly what you mean. Art is something else and embodies so much about us and the world surrounding our lives. And food can... There's art in everything. The art of making money, food, wine, and love. How are things going in the Maroon Palace? The pressure must have increased after you attended that funeral. I have to say, the future's looking good. That's great to hear. As we conversed with Mikhail, I heard Walter raise his voice in an apparent argument with Edith and Simon. We both stopped to listen. Arcacia knows the right way of doing business. Their approach in the world is real and raw. I'd prefer that cutthroat approach in comparison to the niceties. Well, I mean, it's a nice country to visit too. I have traveled there often in business trips. Their attitude on. All countries are nice to visit if you have the cash. Certainly not at all. Half the globe isn't worth our time nor attention. That won't change unless profitability increases. Walter's classic absolutes, but I do agree with you investment-wise. There are only a select group of countries that guarantee a return on investment. Talking of which, we are prepared to visit Agnolia and Welland, where we will meet their government to settle our trade negotiations. Make sure to lay a good foundation for our negotiations to start on. Our talented team is led by Mr. Whiskey. His wealth of knowledge and extensive connections will aid in our endeavor. By the way, I saw that underall construction had already started with the railway construction. That project will surely boost our economy. The mood is already very positive. I've congratulated Mr. Rain for starting such a massive project. Oh, the investment returns will be great. We all hope so, Mr. President, but I think it will work out. Mr. Hull also deserves credit, of course, our great economic minister. Is there a joke or something? Or is there a joke coming? Why, I thought you said you were great at economy. I've heard that you bought a new villa, Simon. I don't comment on rumors, but I'll make an exception since we are among friends. It's true. You're doing a great job, so you deserve it. He is one of the hardest working ministers in the government. He has surely deserved it. Some prefer the carrot and stick approach. I'm more result-oriented. Depends who you work for. But talk about rewards, it is a fact that the government pays far less than the private sector. That's true, but that was a change made on purpose, to push for improvements from the inside. Edith, who was sitting to my left, gently put her hand over my arm for a few seconds. Come on, let's not talk about finance or policy for now. We came here to relax. She turned to Walter and Simon. Isn't that right, gentlemen? They nodded at her and took a sip from their drinks. She slightly turned towards me. So, Mr. Rain, why don't you tell us what's behind that strong character of yours? I've heard that your father was a very wealthy man. Would you say it contributed to a lot to your successes? We had money, but we weren't happy. I learned a lot about life thanks to my absent father. I'm sorry to hear that. I never met your family, Mr. President. How are they doing, if you don't mind me asking? We don't talk much since I became president. It can happen. Sometimes work can get in the way. Don't stress yourself over it. Family is everything. My advice would be to make sure that Frank has a solid relationship with you. He is your future, after all. He is going through the teenager period. It's difficult to connect with him. He's a little shy. Which that was my son's biggest problem. Darren seems to be doing fine. I saw that his yacht party in Binfie made the local news. Well, the rascal didn't even ask for permission to use my yacht and just took it. He basically stole it. Good news is that I finally convinced him to go to university. He will study economics in Lachevin Business School. That's a good choice. Having a degree in Swordsland separates you from the rabble, and we especially need more people who understand economics. Maybe your son will be a great future economist. I wouldn't count on that, but I agree that we need more economists to enter politics. Thankfully, we have a president who seems to be as well-versed in economics as Alfonso. He turned to me. I'm very confident in your abilities to fix our recession. Alfonso was an inspiration for all reformists. He was. He truly wanted to transform this country to a modern nation. His term was very difficult, though. He got destroyed. A correction. It wasn't his policies that destroyed him. It was the old guard. Of course it was. They are a big threat. He threatened their economic power base over the country through a vast privatization plan. They removed him and backed you after. Walter, stop with the conspiracy theories. I think we've had enough drinks. Everyone went quiet. After a long silence, followed by some chit-chat, Walter ordered a bottle of whiskey. There's one good-looking bottle. The waiters brought one of the finest Arcadian whiskeys. It was time for a toast. Toast. I stood up to give a toast. To a constructive and beneficial future. May our differences be set aside for a good future. They say hope dies last. To the future. Raised. I think it's time we call it a night. Edith stood up. Most of us were a little tipsy at this point. I want to thank Mr. President for joining us, and you, Simon, for putting all this together. Thank you, Edith, for joining with a bunch of ugly rich men. That's definitely not me. The President jokes. Thanks for being here. After bidding our farewells, we slowly walked out of the restaurant. The moon was shining bright as everyone except Walter left in their luxury cars. President, a moment alone, please. He called me inside the small VIP lounge. Follow him. I followed him inside. Usually the Lothenburg spokesman doesn't directly comment on the administration, but I'd like to say a few things since this was a special evening. I'm all ears. Go ahead. Finally, a president that listens to the people. It won't be easy to pass this new constitution through the Assembly and the Supreme Court. We could help you get it through if you, in return, help us with a few economic requests. Walter lit his cigar and took a few drags before continuing. The consensus is that we see eye to eye in the economic direction you have taken by promoting a market economy. I'm glad the group is supportive. I'm glad that the group is supportive of the decision. It was calculated. There are many who put their trust in you. Walter smiled. He looked me in the eye. We had a deal about the first mega infrastructure project. You held on to that promise and awarded the contract to the Underhall construction. That went well in our book. We are aware of the upcoming tax meeting. It would be a step in the right direction if private corporations would get a tax cut. Boost the economy of job creation, of course, and the positive side effect would be the support the administration through the entire term. Okay, is it time to write in my journal, corporate tax cut? Is it time? I think it might be time. To boost the economy of job creation, of course, and the positive side effect would be our support to the administration throughout the entire term. I will go. I will give large private corporations a tax reduction. Promise large tax. corporate tax cut. I'm very satisfied to hear this, to us and the prosperous future of Swordland. He smiled. It is assuring to know we are allies. See you, President. Walter left, and Serge came to pick me up. Entered the car. Hey, if they can help me get this through, I think it's worth it. Because this is going to be hard to get all this through. I entered the car, and we drove to our residence, Lochevin. Serge took the seaside route. Whew, okay. Car bomb attack in Arvery. A car parked in Anglo-Sordish-dominated neighborhood in the outskirts of Arvery has exploded. Arvery police reported that there was no casualties or injuries. The initial investigations found that the car was rigged with a timed bomb. No perpetrators have been found connected to the incident so far. Further investigations are ongoing, and details have not been shared with the public. Ribble. School poisoning connected to British woman. Vilma Sir, who was working at the school kitchen, was apprehended with connections to last week's school cafeteria poisoning in Ribble. The act was found to be politically motivated, as the perpetrators are connected to the banned British Freedom Party. Sir is suspecting to have been an active member of the British Freedom Front since the start of this year. She's been sentenced to 60 years in prison. What's on the news? Bill on the rights of workers being drafted. The Grand National Assembly of Swordland will vote on a bill on Thursday to protect workers' rights in Swordland that supporters are calling the most ambitious pro-labor legislation in decades. See, once again, I'm going to give tax cuts to the rich, and then I'm going to sign the bill on the rights of workers. One for the corporation, one for the people. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And that's how I get this economy back and running. I mean, hey, it's not perfect, but I think it makes some sense. Thursday to protect workers' rights, and supporters are calling the most ambitious pro-labor legislation in decades, and which one USP representatives has dismissed as the worst bill in the Assembly. The Workers' Protection Act has strong support from both the PFJP and the NFP, as well as labor leaders. The bill was a result of bipartisan effort from the leading figures of the PFJP, as well as the Ministry of Health, led by Pascal Benawol. It was proposed to the Assembly by Representative Alban Clavin of the USP. The Workers' Protection Act amends the Labor Act by establishing a minimum wage of 2.5 SR per hour, and adding guidelines on overtime work as well as safety and protection guidelines. It also extends the rights of the workers to all migrants, acknowledging their rights as workers in Swordsland. The bill also makes it illegal for corporations to force workers to do unpaid overtime work. Companies who fail to abide by the rules established with the bill will be heavily fined by the government and may be forced to face legal action. Some estimates suggest costs for those firms would increase by 50% if they have to treat workers according to the proposed laws. Despite the bill coming from the governing USP, it faces huge opposition inside the party. However, the support of the PFJP and the NFP, the bill has a high chance of passing the Assembly. President meets with the Business Council. Our sources have reported that yesterday, President Rain had a meeting with the Business Council behind closed doors in Lochevin, which later continued with a dinner in a five-star Esterna restaurant with leading figures from the council. The agenda of the meeting was not disclosed, and the contents of the meeting remained a secret. But it can be expected that President Rain has discussed the future economic plans of his administration, as well as listening to the concerns of leading industry figures. The outcome of the meeting will hopefully arrive quickly, with positive developments and more transparency compared to today. Morbell mine disaster, 112 dead. Stop having people die. Disaster hit Morbell last night when one of the main support shafts in the Morbell coal mine collapsed, trapping many coal miners inside. The collapsing structure has also started an underground fire, turning the sky black with ash and sorrow in Morbell today. As reported by the government, the current death toll sits at 112 deaths, with many other miners still trapped inside. The rescue operations are continuing without any sleep. Investigators have told us that this might have happened due to the neglect of the Nadim mining group. Families of miners and people of Morbell showed up in protests at the site of the disaster. Coincidentally, the workers' right bill that was being drafted in the Assembly for the past few months comes too late. The Eza Swordland are now turned to President Rain to see his decision on the bill. Lochevin League of Women March. Hundreds of women, organized by the Swordish League of Women, marched and called for gender equality in the country. The group held signs heightening the issues of domestic violence, the wage gap, maternity leave, and the sexist attitude in the education system. Police forces quickly created a security cordon to protect the march after a large group of religious counter-protesters arrived. The calls for equality were drowned by the loud group of conservatives. The protests were a clear reflection of the division that surrounds the country. It also raises questions if the First Lady, Monica Rain's agenda to raise awareness and trigger change on the issue will bear fruit. Meeting on the Energy Protection Act of 1932. As the morning sun streamed through the window of the presidential office, an imminent meeting loomed on the agenda. In a quarter of an hour, I was set to discuss the Energy Protection Act of 1932 with Minister Graff, Hull, and Whiskey. The recent abrogation in the Grand National Assembly, coupled with ongoing dialogues with Gossam, had only served to amplify the discourse surrounding the legislation. I was sipping my morning coffee and enjoying a quiet moment of solitude when David arrived, characteristically early. A great morning to you, Mr. President. I trust I'm not imposing by arriving ahead of schedule. Not at all, David. On the contrary, we've now got an extra few minutes to strategize before the meeting. I'm relieved to hear that, Anton. I depart early from my appointments nowadays, as the stairs of the Capitol become more challenging than I like to admit. It's nothing to be ashamed of, David. Would you like some tea or coffee? Or coffee or tea, I mean? Whatever. Reverse order, it's the same thing. I've already had my tea today, as per my doctor's advice. She suggests chamomile in the morning and sage tea in the evening for optimal health. Listening to the doctor does bring me some comfort. It feels as though my throat has been refreshed, thanks to her. His gaze drifted, looking on something beyond the window. A colossal zeppelin traversed the sky above the Marine District. For a fleeting moment, it blotted out the sun before gently veering to the left, letting light flood the office once more. I still remember the first airships in Sworland. We purchased them from Quinaul after the war, during the birth of what's so-called the Second Republic. Our infrastructure lay in ruins, and these zeppelins offered a much-needed lifeline, a chance to traverse and rebuild. And then, thanks to our research council's diligent effort, we started manufacturing our own in Gelsword. The manufacturing of zeppelins in Gelsword was truly a turning point. You're quite right. It symbolized our resilience, our determination to regain our footing. It was a beacon of hope, signaling the revival of battered industry. Our reliance on others was temporary, a stepping stone towards the self-sufficiency we achieved with the National Autarky Plan. Even though it had downsides, I could still consider it a success. A pause fell over the room. David's gaze landed on the portrait of Turkin Sol hanging in the presidential office. His eyes lingered on the stern face of the old leader. A sigh escaped his lips. Now, when I think of the EPA, my mind is carried back to the formative years of the post-Civil War whole sword in the 1930s. The debates, the passion, the potential for transportation. It was a time of renewed optimism. It is our duty now to learn from the past and strive for a better future. What applies back then won't apply now. Yeah, life in Holsford back then was tough. Electricity blackouts, ruined infrastructure, unemployment, gangs. It was a challenging period, yes, but we persevered together as a nation. I did not agree with all the measures enacted by the technocratic government of that era, but some were undeniably effective. In the end, it took collective effort to reassemble our nation's fragmented pieces. I'm sure you remember those dark days yourself. I know you were just a student at the Yale University of Culture, witnessing what true oppression was like. These experiences have shaped me, and they continue to inform my decisions as president. The minorities of this nation have suffered particularly. David turned towards the large-frame portrait of his father, Artur Seneca Whiskey, hanging on the wall. Painted with rich, warm hues, it captured the first president of Sworland in his prime. A spark of determination gleamed in his eyes. His mouth was set in a gentile, firm smile, a reflection of his belief in a better future for our country. Your father's legacy still looms large. Has it influenced your own views? My father was a visionary, a man who sought to modernize Sworland into a secular, democratic republic. I've always been guided by his principles. His ability to mobilize public support for revolutionary change is a constant inspiration to me. He looked back at the portrait with a mix of pride and sadness. In a way, Torquemada did carry on my father's legacy. Under his leadership, we transitioned from a military government to a civilian one, and experienced our first multi-party elections. But over time, he drifted away from the ideals of reform and progress that my father held so dear. His visionary zeal succumbed to the more pragmatic, more conservative, and sometimes even regressive dictates of political survival. Perhaps history would have taken a different course if the ISM incident hadn't happened. Indeed, the ISM incident is a reminder of how unforeseen events can rapidly change the course of a nation. It turned us away from the path of reform. We still worked hard to create the Swordsman my father had envisioned. Alfonso, for all his flaws, did seek to set the nation back on a path of progress with his focus on free market and economic liberalization. His EPA amendments, for example, were a severe departure from Seoul's national autarky plan, but many praised the way that it opened the doors for unprecedented foreign investment in our energy economy. Yeah. Do you think the EPA still holds relevance today, or should we consider a complete overhaul? The EPA has its roots in a different era. While some of its principles may still hold, we may not shy away from revisiting it in light of our current needs and challenges. Just as the conversation hit a pause, the door swung open, and the other ministers arrived. Simon Hole entered first with a confident stride. "Good morning, Mr. President. David, I trust the discussion is progressing well." Elias followed closely behind. She walked in with an air of calm and authority, her gaze sweeping across the room. "Gentlemen, I hope I'm not interrupting anything crucial." "Welcome, everyone. It's great to see you all here. We have some important discussion on the agenda today, particularly concerning the Energy Protection Act." "Thank you, David. I appreciate the urgency. Let's get right to the heart of the matter. Today, we will have the opportunity to shape the economic strategy of Swordsland for decades to come. The EPA has long stood as a key contention and debate point in the National Autarky Plan. The matter is a discussion of how Swordsland sees itself and how we will position ourselves in the world. Our nation has taken very different economic approaches in the last 4 decades. Mr. President has decided to lean on promoting a market economy, which should give us a clear indicator. Should we decide to increase the EPA threshold to 49% or eliminate it entirely, it could spark an influx of foreign investment. Given our current economic predicament, this would be a significant boost. Promoting a market economy does not inherently translate to prosperity for all. It can lead to concentration of wealth, with the rich getting richer while the middle and working classes struggle. We need to ensure the benefit of economic growth are shared equitably across all layers of Swedish society. I believe a free market fosters competition, which ultimately leads to innovation and economic growth. I understand your viewpoint, Mr. President, but we must also consider the potential pitfalls of unregulated capitalism. Mr. President, shall we return to the subject of the EPA? Our current vision of the Energy Protection Act dates back to 1949. President Alfonso's amendment raised the cap on foreign investment in Swedish energy companies up to 20%. In my view, it was a necessary step to attract foreign investment and stimulate the economy. We must remember that Swordsland was facing an economic crisis during this censure, and these changes provided a lifeline for our energy industries. But did the increased foreign ownership actually lead to substantial economic growth? While the increase in foreign ownership alone didn't lead to a drastic upturn in economic growth, it did have a positive effect. It facilitated foreign investment and provided our industries with much-needed capital. The effects of such policy changes often take time to fully manifest, but they lay the groundwork for future economic development. The Assembly has spoken on this matter, and as it stands, the Energy Protection Act of 1933 will not be repealed. It's clear that our colleagues have recognized the potential risk of exposing our energy sector to foreign ownership. While this doesn't end the debate, it does underline the importance of respecting our Assembly's decision. The Assembly's decision has been made, but that doesn't mean we will stop advocating for what we believe is right in Swordsland. I respect the decision of the Assembly, Lilius. However, we mustn't allow this setback to deter us from exploring the best possible options for Swordsland. The global landscape is ever-evolving, and we must adapt accordingly. It's also important to remember that the Assembly's decision is not the final word. There is room for further legislative efforts and executive initiatives. Even though I'm literally working to change that right now, but that doesn't matter, it's not that way yet. When it comes to the Energy Protection Act, I believe we should consider a complete removal. If not, at the very least, we should increase the threshold to 49%. This would undoubtedly attract more foreign investment and strengthen energy institutions such as Gassam and Swedish Petroleum. I'm sure you're right about that, but we have to remember that we're dealing with national security as well as economics. Reverting to the Sol era 10% limit or keeping the law as it is would be a safer approach. We cannot risk our energy infrastructure falling into foreign hands, especially not to Rumberg. I see merit to both arguments. Yes, we need to protect our national security, but we also need to consider the economic implications. Perhaps a mixed approach would work best. What if we increase the limit to 49%, therefore attracting foreign investment while maintaining Swedish control over critical energy sectors? Lilius, you mentioned national security risks. Could you elaborate further on that? The national security risks are significant. Foreign entities could use their stake in our energy sector as leverage in diplomatic or economic negotiations. National security risks are always a concern when discussing foreign ownership. That's why it's crucial to have thorough vetting process and monitoring processes in place. Don't forget about the importance of economic security. In a globalized world, economic strength can be just as critical as military might. But yes, it's essential to maintain strict oversight and regulations to ensure national interests aren't compromised. Considering potential foreign buyers such as Quinol, Rizia, Anrika, Rimberg, and Lispia, what are the worst case scenarios if they gain control of their hydroelectric, gas, and oil sectors? Think about it, Mr. President. If any one of these countries, but especially Rumberg, gain control of our energy sector, they could cut off our power at any moment. We would also be forced to comply with any decision they made regarding prices or environmental measures. There's no denying the potential risks of foreign buyers gaining control over critical sectors. If we increase the foreign ownership, therefore those threshold to 49%, we can attract more investments while mitigating those risks. While we may see entities from Quinol, Rizia, Enrica, Rumberg, or Lesbia as potential threats, it's also critical to see them as potential partners. The scenario Lilius petitions are possible, of course, but think about the economic growth and international relations that could be fostered. How would the Energy Protection Act changes impact corporations like Gossam, which could sell to any entity under the revised laws? I believe you already know the answer to this, Mr. President. Gossam could fall under foreign control, just like any other energy corporation. On the other hand, foreign investments would result in increased resources to flow into Gossam and its ilk. And those resources could be channeled into further development of our energy sector. Yes, Gossam could potentially sell to anyone, but wouldn't that be a testament to the strength and attractiveness to our energy sector in the global stage? How would changes to the Energy Protection Act affect energy prices, Swordland? With increased foreign investment, we could potentially see a decrease in energy prices. We should also consider the potential impact on job security and national control of our energy sector. Changing the Energy Protection Act could lead to increased energy prices, as foreign entities could manipulate the market. With increased competition for investment, we could also see a decrease in energy prices. The more players in the market, the more competitive the prices will be. So who knows? We can proceed. It's time to settle the subject. Given the turbulent economic landscape, maintaining the status quo of the Energy Protection Act could offer stability. We are already open to foreign investment at the 20% threshold. Changing this percentage may introduce unexpected challenges and could complicit our foreign relations. I firmly believe in the sovereignty and strength of our nation. Returning to the threshold to 10% as it was during the Sol era could protect us from undue foreign influence and ensure that our energy sector remains in Swedish hand. Increasing foreign investment could significantly stimulate our economy. A careful increase to 49% could be balanced compromise, signaling to the world that Swordland is open for business, while still retaining a majority of control of the estates. You must consider the far-reaching implication of our actions. Today's decisions regarding the EPA will significantly impact Gossam and other corporations in the future. Regarding Gossam, our co-investment with Rizia allows us to distribute the financial burden and mitigate risks. This decision promotes regional cooperation, aligning well with the fiscal policies. Our partnership with Rizia is a testament to our commitment to regional cooperation. It's a pragmatic move that will be beneficial for both nations. Simon Mattai suggested his glasses. With Swordland and Rizia co-investing in Gossam, there's a chance to build a partnership that benefits both our economies. However, how we adjust the EPA could significantly impact the outcome. Sharing the burden with Frisia does provide some reassurance. However, if we raise the foreign ownership threshold, we must be aware of the influence of Rumberg. Let's not make hasty. You should consider removing. While your points are valid, Lilius, we cannot ignore the potential economic benefits. Raising the threshold could attract more investors and increase the values of our shares. I understand the potential economic benefits, but we can't compromise our sovereignty for profits. Increasing the threshold might attract more foreign investors, increase the value of our stake, but of course we should ensure that Swordland interests are safeguarded. Opting for a more balanced approach aligns well with our objective of maintaining positive trade relations without compromising our sovereignty. Yeah, our priority should be balancing the needs for economic growth while maintaining national security. Perhaps a phased approach to increase foreign ownership could be the answer. I would say we've covered the implication of the EPA decision fairly thoroughly, Mr. President. Our actions should be guided by the best interests of our nations. Mr. President, it's time to make a decision. What will we do with the EPA? We will increase the foreign ownership threshold to 49%. This will increase foreign investment. A balanced approach will serve us well. This could approach significant foreign investment. A substantial increase. I fear we are opening ourselves up too much. The door to the room opened. Livia Suno carried a tray laden with assortments of beverages. She was a little clumsy as she maneuvered around the room, refilling cups and glasses of tea, coffee, and water. Excuse me, gentlemen and madam. I've brought refreshments. Thank you, Livia. A coffee for me, please. Of course, Mr. President. Here you are. As she finished serving the beverages, Livia retreated towards the door. She glanced around the room one last time before quickly backing out. The meeting resumed, her conversation growing slightly louder with the clink of cups and glasses. While we are here, I will inform you that I've been lending my expertise to Minister Benewald in relation to the Workers' Rights Bill. I believe it's crucial to ensure fair treatment for our workforce, and it is nearing presentation. Your collaboration with Benewald is commendable. I hope it will bring about a positive change for our workforce. Thank you, Mr. President. The bill aims to prioritize workers' well-being. It's a step towards a more humane economic system. I share your sentiments, Mr. President. However, we must be careful to avoid encouraging anti-business tendencies. I concur, Mr. President. Ensuring the rights of our workers is paramount, although we must be cautious of any hidden agenda. Anyway, I must be working on our upcoming term budget meeting and a proposal for business taxation changes. Specifically, we're considering a range of 10% tax changes for small to medium enterprises and large corporations. This could be a significant move for our economic landscape. Such a taxation approach could indeed invigorate our economy, but we must ensure it doesn't burden the SMEs unduly. I appreciate your insight, Mr. President. Ensuring the survival and growth of the SMEs is at the foremost of our considerations. Tax changes could indeed have a significant impact on our economy. We must consider their implications carefully. Large corporate corporations have enjoyed significant benefits and loopholes for too long. They should pay their fair share. As the ministers rose from their seats, the late morning light spilled into the room through the ornate windows. It seems a signal of the conclusion of the meeting. Our work is our legacy. Let's make sure it's one that Swordland can be proud of. Thank you for the discussions. I'll continue working on our priorities. Goodbye, everyone. See you at the term budget meeting. Until next time, dear colleagues, take care and see you soon. Woo! Okay, this is definitely a good time to go ahead and end this episode. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell button. And as always, peace.